This is Councilmember Gil Cedillo. I'd like to get your attention. This is the Immigrant Affairs, Civil Rights, and Equity Committee. This is November 1st, 2018. We are here in the incredible chambers of the Los Angeles City Council. I want to begin with public comment. We will move to item 1. We will move to item 2. The item 2 will be read into the record, and then the vote for this matter will take place in 2 weeks in front of the full City Council. So again, we will convene now. We will take public comment. We will take action on the appointment of Mr. Mack, and then we will read into the record the proposal, and then that matter will be voted upon in front of the full City Council in 2 weeks. Okay? So, let's move with public comment. Anybody sign up for public comment? Stop. Herman, are you in the meeting?
So to note for the record, we don't have a quorum.
There is no quorum.
And
this is
I would suggest that our appointment for Anthony Mack be postponed until we have a full quorum so that participants can legislate on the rules and declaration how local government will work in the favor of public interest. Now, in addition to my public comment, which is general public comment, not that I'm in favor of Trump, but I fully support Trump. Stop illegal activity, not just in the state of California, but in America. For God's sake, veterans living in the street, for God's sake, Americans living on the street, don't we not got priorities? Are we not going to improve the lives of Americans first before we let wetbacks like Jose Huizar fuck up our communities?
Are you guys checking in back there? Have you guys signed in for public comment? Is this it? Okay. Daniel, that was Herman. Right, so let's go to Daniel Perez, Denise Edwards, Pastor Daniel Perez, Rob Kwan, and Abhilasha Bola. Is that correct? Abhilasha Bola? Let's start with that. Guillermo Torres and Mr. Keeley, when you're ready and available, you're welcome to come up at your leisure. Mr. Pettis? Just keep track.
Good afternoon. Thank you, City Council and staff here. I want to thank you. First of all, I'm thankful for that we enacted language to protect our brothers and sisters in the African American community, the discrimination language. So I'm thankful that you were able to be good stewards in the position that God has placed you all. The only thing I would ask is that additional funding for education and outreach, and to make sure that there's going to be accountability to make sure that the discrimination against our brothers and sisters are enforced. So once again, I thank you for your leadership, for putting that language in the Human Rights Ordinance, because it's going to give a protection, and it's going to have some accountability to a lot of industries that are not hiring our African American brothers, including the hospitality industry, the construction industries, and other industries. So thank you for being a good steward and putting that language in the Human Rights Ordinance. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you, Daniel. Denise Edwards.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Edwards. I represent CLU, Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, and also I'm a missionary evangelist with the Church of God in Christ. And I'm here to appeal to the council to not only pass the ordinance, but fully fund it, because right now, without that money, they can't fully enforce the language in the ordinance. I know this for a fact because I'm also a former worker of the hospitality industry, and we included such language in our contracts, but unfortunately we couldn't enforce it because we didn't have the backing of the politicians and the community. And I'm asking you, as a former hospitality worker and an African American who saw all of us discriminated against in the industry, that you fully fund it. If the $600,000 isn't enough, God bless you.
Thank you.
Afternoon, council members. My name is Daniel Perez. I'm a pastor with New City Church. I'd like to also commend the council's decision to implement this language. It's a move in the right direction. I'm thankful for it. Commend you for that. And I want to echo my sister Denise with a request for more adequate funding for the successful rollout of this ordinance. And not only funding, but a public education outreach plan. And people need to know about this if it's going to be successful. So I want to put that out and thank you once again.
Good afternoon. My name is Pastor Q from the Church Without Walls, Skid Row, and also with Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice as convener of the Black and Brown Clergy and Community Coalition. This is really important to me, and I commend you for accepting and adding the language that the community has recommended into the ordinance. Why is this important? Because discrimination creates conflict between groups who are being discriminated against and other marginalized groups in our communities. We are sick of the current President of the United States, his administration, and his followers employing discrimination and immigration as a tactic to divide Black and brown communities. So this is important to us. We also call for adequate funding, adequate staffing, and adequate enforcement.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, councilman members. My name is Reverend Walter Contreras. I am a vice president of NALEC, National Latino Evangelical Coalition, and also I am here representing the voice of the Black and Brown Coalition that works with CLU. We support the passage of the Civil Human Rights Ordinance, and we thank you for the work that you have done. We are hoping that you understand there needs to be an adequate funding and resources to be effective. So without the adequate funding and resources, the ordinances will not be able to work well. And so we need for you to address the issues also of the discrimination protection in the city. So we're hoping that, and we're urging the city to participate in a legislative advocacy in order to minimize any state's restriction on the city's authority to protect against discrimination. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Abila Shabola, and I'm the Senior Policy Coordinator at Jobs to Move America. We support the passage of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance, and thank you for your leadership and work on this. Thank you especially for committing to include strong anti-discrimination language in this ordinance. This is a really critical step in ensuring that workers do not face discrimination on the job and in the hiring process. While we applaud the inclusion of such strong language, this ordinance is not adequately funded to meet the needs of a city of over 4 million residents. San Francisco is less than a fourth of the size of our city, yet the San Francisco Human Rights Division has a budget of $3 million, while ours would only have a budget of $600,000. Thus, we urge you all to adequately fund the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance to meet the needs of our large and diverse city. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Council and Committee. My name is Akili. I'm with the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance and the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. And we see you moving in the right direction, and we commend that. But like all boats that are moving in the right direction, you need gas, you need energy, you need a way to keep going, and that means funding this. We find ways to fund what we think is important. We are asking you now to make this important, to make this a priority, and find the funding that's necessary. It's not enough to say the right words unless we act on the right words. And by funding it, making it real, that means that we can count on our members and other people in our communities having a way for local enforcement and fights against discrimination. So we ask you, 1, to fund it adequately, 2, to support it in all the ways you have. And we thank you for what you've done so far. Let's go further. Thank you.
Rob Kwan, here in support of the Human Rights Ordinance and the Black Worker Center recommendation. Specifically, we need a larger budget. We pay out 10, 20 times this amount when somebody trips and falls on a sidewalk. Surprisingly, working on an LA City Council campaign offered one of the most revealing insights into prejudice and discrimination in LA, in particular what African Americans face in this city. I had a few experiences, but nothing like our black staffers. No one else had any issues getting out the vote in Encino, but our black organizers were promptly kicked out by private security every time they attempted to knock on doors. Later on in the campaign in East Hollywood, one of our volunteers asked the field director if she could join me knocking on doors one evening. He ended up sending Anthony, and an hour later he got an angry call from the volunteer, incredulously screaming, "I have a hard enough time getting old white ladies to answer the door for me, and you send me a black kid?" These are everyday, mundane examples of what kind of discrimination persists in the city, in particular with the African American community. I hope you do the right thing and adequately fund this.
Other speakers, Carlos Amador, Eli Longnecker, Natividad Rodriguez, Nativo Lopez, Mariana Magana.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Carlos Amador, and I'm with the California Immigrant Policy Center. As a civil rights and human rights advocate, I'm in full support of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance, and I thank you all for your work on this. I would like to also raise that the proposed ordinance needs adequate funding and resources in order to be able to make it the most impactful for our communities. Without this adequate funding and resources, the ordinance will lack the capacity to address the discrimination and protection in the city. I also believe that the City of Los Angeles needs to step up in its advocacy to ensure that worker rights protections are as expansive as possible, and this includes having the city to engage in state legislative advocacy in order to eradicate state restrictions that and allow for the city to implement its own protections against discrimination. We cannot serve all of our residents if we don't count on the tools and the liberty to protect forcefully against discrimination in the workplace, the streets, and everywhere. Thank you for your support, and I support this ordinance. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Eli Longnecker. I'm here on behalf of the LA Worker Center Network, of which the Black Worker Center is a member. We fully support the passage of the ordinance, and we hope that you will as well. We've been working with the Office of Wage Standards on outreach to make sure everyone knows about the increase of the minimum wage. There are millions of workers in Los Angeles. That means there's tens of thousands of businesses, and each one of those will need to know about the ordinance to protect workers. So there needs to be adequate funding for that reason, and what is on the table right now is not enough. It takes a long time to walk from one business to the next to make sure that people understand what they need to know, and so I hope that you will take this into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to translate.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Natividad Rodríguez. Vengo del sur centro de Los Ángeles. Vengo,
Good afternoon. My name is Natividad Rodriguez. I come from South Central Los Angeles.
vengo aquí por el propósito de apoyar a todos nuestros hermanos para que nos hagan respetar
I come here for the reason of supporting all of our brothers and sisters so that you can support us.
y también para que hagan valer nuestros derechos y no ser discriminados por nadie.
And so that our rights can be valued and not be discriminated against by anybody.
Y respeten los salarios que dicen que
And respect the salaries.
porque a mí me ha tocado trabajar donde dicen pagan tanto la hora y a la mera hora no, me dan menos del salario que deben de ser. No es el mínimo, es menos del mínimo.
In my experience, I've worked places where they say they're going to give you a certain amount per hour, and then in the moment when they're supposed to pay you, they're paying you less than they said they would, less than the minimum.
Y yo lo veo, lo tomo como una discriminación al latino.
And I take it, I see it as discrimination against, in my case, Latinos.
Así que vengo a exigir nuestros derechos como humanos que somos y que nos hagan respetar como latinos porque nosotros valemos, todos valemos igual.
And I'm coming today because all of our rights should be valued, we as Latinos, all of us.
Ojalá nos tomen en cuenta que nuestro tiempo que hemos dejado allá, nuestros quehaceres en nuestras casas por venir aquí a apoyarnos unos por los otros, sea válido.
And I hope that you'll take us into account the time that we've taken away from our homes to be here, that will be valued.
Y espero que nos escuchen todos los concejales.
And I hope that all of the council members
Gracias.
listen to us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nativo Lopez. I represent the Hermandad Mexicana, the original. First of all, I'd like to go on the record applauding the work that you've done, the time that you've invested, the mindfulness of grappling with a very serious challenge that we have in our region pressed upon us by the current administration in Washington, D.C. You stood up to the administration. You have the back of our local community, residents, citizens, immigrants generally, and I want to applaud you for that work. I understand that the dimension of the ordinance has expanded to include, in a broad way, the concept of civil rights, the practicalities of civil rights. I would advocate to include in the ordinance a remedy to address complaints of discrimination in areas of employment, a local investigatory mechanism that would be faster than merely relying on the state agency. The state process is lengthy, telephonic, and has not proven to be adequate remedy. Let's deal with this issue locally, and certainly increased funding would be in order. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. I speak to you today in order to urge your support on the proposed establishment of the Human Rights Ordinance and the proper funding that would be needed for it. I'm the managing civil rights attorney at the Council on American and Islamic Relations Greater Los Angeles Area Chapter. The need for such an ordinance is serious. In the past calendar year, our office serving the Greater Los Angeles area received 118 complaints involving hate crimes and incidents, 66 complaints of employment discrimination, 19 complaints involving school bullying, and 32 complaints involving discrimination at public accommodations, all just religious-based discriminations. Most of our clients are discouraged from pursuing remedies to their grievances based on their vulnerability and ability to cope with the complicated legal system and being trapped in prolonged administrative processes to remedy the discrimination they've experienced. In addition to adopting the language as is in the proposed ordinance, the necessity for proper funding is real. As mentioned previously, San Francisco has a third or fourth of the population that the Los Angeles area is experiencing with a $3 million budget. Meanwhile, $600,000 has been proposed. In order for clients not to be trapped in a prolonged, ineffective administrative process, necessary funding is crucial. Thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Jeremiah Gordon. Malcolm Harris. Marwa Rafahi. We heard from you.
My name is Jeremiah Gordon, and I'm representing the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. I want to say thank you for the hard work you've done thus far. I'm also here to urge you to add community service partnerships into the startup budget. Currently, the startup budget only allocates $600,000 to establish this ordinance and leaves out community partnerships and a public education campaign. Community service partnerships will help with intake assistance and help with the referral process of state and federal agencies. Employment discrimination claims make over 86% of the discrimination claims in California. We need community partnerships to educate our communities. Further, adequately resourcing and funding community partnerships will ensure that underrepresented communities are a part of the process to end employment discrimination. Again, I urge you to include a community partnership component in the startup budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Malcolm Harris, representing the Black Worker Center. I want to say first that we support the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance and want to thank you for the hard work that you've done so far. I'm also here to urge you to add community service partnerships and the public education campaign into the startup budget. Currently, the startup budget only allocates $600,000 to establish this ordinance and leaves out community partnerships and the public education campaign. This ordinance, in order to be effective, needs a public education campaign that educates our community through convening of the community outreach, technology, and media platforms that reach and educate the community about the commission and how Los Angelinos can identify discrimination. This public education campaign is needed to educate employers on the ordinance and FEHA liability. Without placing a public education campaign in the startup budget, the ordinance will lack the capacity to address discrimination protection in the city. I urge you to add a public education campaign into the startup budget.
Thank you. Is there a Pastor Q? Spoke. Robert Hernandez. Sho King. Trina Taylor.
Hello, good afternoon, Council. My name is Robert Hernandez, and I was a ramp worker for 13 years for a organization. I've been discriminated against by upper-level management. They said that I had a DUI, but I didn't, but still they let me go. This has affected my finance, my mental health, and my pride because of the responsibilities that I have. We support the latest changes to the ordinance, and we are excited for the ordinance to be acted out. The only thing missing is providing adequate resources and a budget to this ordinance. We urge you to make an adequate budget and provide monies for community partnership and public education campaign component. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Sho King.
Peace and blessings. My name is Sho King. Good afternoon, council members. I am representing Hope for Hip Hop in tandem with the work of the Black Worker Center. We support the passage of the Human and Civil Rights Ordinance, and thank you for your work on this ordinance. I'm here to urge you all to vote for the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance and choosing a budget that will adequate what the needs are for. This city is allocating $600,000 in the budget but that is just not enough. The budget does not take into account salaries based on the city scale or union salaries and benefits. This budget does not take into account a community partnership and public education outreach plan. San Francisco Human Rights Division, which focuses only and solely on discrimination, has a budget of over $3 million. $600,000 is not enough. I think we've paid that in parking tickets alone here in this room. So we urge you again to please add an adequate budget for this ordinance. Thank you.
My name is Trina Traylor, and I represent the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. We support this ordinance, but the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance needs adequate funding and resources to be effective. The current draft allocates $600,000 to the commission. However, this budget fails to take into account salary based on city scale or union salaries and benefits. Additionally, the ordinance does not have a public communication education budget to inform residents of the ordinance. The ordinance must have adequate resources and funding. Without funding and resources, the ordinance will lack the capacity to address discrimination protection in the city. San Francisco has a human rights division which focuses only on discrimination. Their human rights division has a budget of over $3 million. The city of Los Angeles estimated workforce is 4 times that of San Francisco. I urge this committee to place adequate funding and resources to the Human and Civil Rights Ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Anyone get missed on this list here?
Good afternoon, Council. Osceola Sankara with ACT LA. Thank you so much for hearing us. And we're here as ACT LA in support of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance. Our members are working every day to create good jobs, building housing we can afford near transit. And it's vital that those workers, construction workers that are building our cities, have protections against discrimination that is able to be enforced locally. All of our workers deserve this basic human right. We commend you for moving forward this ordinance, and we are in strong support of more and better funding and resources to back it up. San Francisco has a human rights division that focuses solely on discrimination with a budget of over $3 million. That's a great model that we can look at here in LA, and we hope that the city of LA does step in and fund this so that we can really champion local control to protect the rights of workers in our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian McNeil, and I'm a member of the Los Angeles Black Workers Center. God bless you all for your work on the passage of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance. We hope and pray that you all will vote for this Civil and Human Rights Ordinance. This ordinance desperately needs adequate funding and resources in order to be effective. We all know about San Francisco's Human Rights Division that only focuses on discrimination and has a budget of $3 million. The current budget of $600,000 for our city is currently not enough. The city of Los Angeles should step in and champion for local control in order to protect the rights of workers in Los Angeles. So we'd like to urge the city to participate in legislative advocacy in order to minimize any state restriction on the city's authority to protect its workers against discrimination. And I've been a victim of discrimination, racially and handicapped worker discrimination. We strongly support this Civil and Human Rights Ordinance and your work on the ordinance. Thank you all.
Good afternoon. My name is Cornell Jones. I'm a proud member of the Black Workers Center. I am a Marine Corps veteran who has struggled to find equality jobs. I am currently working 2 jobs right now. One of them is graveyard. My wife is currently complaining about me not spending enough time with her. The city of Los Angeles should step up and campaign for the local control in order to protect the rights of the workers in Los Angeles. Without adequately funding and resources, the coordinates with lack of the capacity to address the discrimination protection in the city. We urge you to provide the community partnership and public education campaign. Again, we support the Civil Rights and Human Rights Ordinance, and thank you very much for letting us come up and speak. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fabian Gonzalez. I work with SAGE. We're a nonprofit organization around tenant rights, healthy housing, and equitable development. We do a lot of economic justice work in South Central LA. And as you know, there's been a history of discrimination in the workforce and in housing. And we want to continue to empower the community to give you the tools so you can be champions for this kind of work that is happening in South Central LA. So again, we at SAGE, we support the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance, and we thank you for your support.
Hi, counselors. My name's Adam Overton. I'm a volunteer with Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice, and I'm here standing in solidarity with the community and the Black Worker Center of Los Angeles. I'd like to just share my experience outside of that as a former union organizer. I've worked for both SEIU 721 as an organizer and with NUHW, National Union of Healthcare Workers. And if you walk inside these, these hospitals, these various places of employment, you'll have to scratch around and look to find any Black workers in them. At the last hospital I worked at, our bargaining unit had 600 members. Out of that, how many were part of the Black community? 3 out of 600. The Black community does not have access to the kinds of jobs that they need and deserve. And when they get in there, they are paid less and put in lower positions than other folks. So thank you again for supporting this legislation, and let's put some funding behind it now. Thank you.
Andres Kwan, ACLU. We're working closely with the Black Workers Center and our partners to ensure the strongest possible Human Rights Commission. During these long days of hate, bigotry, and even to the point of horrific violence, we must come together to fight these forces. And where people in elected office from the very top of the political echelon are inciting violence, you, our city selected leaders, you must take bold action. And we'll be right with you as you do. With only 1 minute, I'll emphasize a few points. First, language throughout the ordinance should be gender neutral. The definition of protected status should include gender identity, and expression. The administration's move to narrowly define gender as, quote, a biological immutable condition determined by genitalia at birth, end quote, is despicable. That's not us. We do not live in a binary world. Second, commissioners should come from communities disproportionately experiencing discrimination. For immigrants, citizenship status should not disqualify you from serving. Finally, besides this ordinance, we must enshrine into city law all the protections we can muster for immigrant community members. You know what's happening every day. The city, this committee can and should do more. Bring the LA Safe ordinance to the committee once and for all.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Amardeep Gill, and I'm representing LA Alliance for a New Economy. We work in partnership with Justice for Port Truck Drivers and Warehouse Worker Resource Center, as well as the Black Worker Center. Just recently, warehouse workers from NFI Cal Cartridge, which operates at the Port of LA, on our city property, filed a racial discrimination complaint with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing for their practice of discriminating against Black workers. We are in full support of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance, as well as the creation of the Human Rights Commission. Far too many Angelinos face racial discrimination at the workplace. I urge you to vote yes for the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance and include strong enforcement language, as well as allocate adequate funding for this ordinance to make a real impact on the lives of Angelinos. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Unless someone comes forward, that concludes public comment. That is the conclusion of public comment. I thank all of you. We want to move forward to item number 1, Mr. President. That is the appointment of Mr. Anthony Mack I want to move that on consent. Mr. Anthony Mack will become a member of our Human Relations Commission. Thank you. We'll move that to approve as a member of the commission to the council. Yeah, it'll be a communication from the chair. This goes to the council at the next meeting. Thank you, or the next appropriate meeting. Item number 2, we have a presentation of the suggested language for the commission. Item 2 is the creation of the commission is a matter that we have wanted to consider in order to create a process that is inclusive and responsive to those within our communities. The recommendations we will make today are consistent with that objective. We will create a commission that will serve as an accessible and responsive alternative for those in need of urgent relief. Given that this item has been previously discussed, I'm ready to make the following recommendations. Without objection, I'd like to hear from the CLA.
The following are recommendations from the chair. Number 1 is to request the city attorney, with the assistance of the CLA, to prepare and present Section 1 of the current draft ordinance entitled Civil and Human Rights Commission as a standalone ordinance to include the following amendments. A, provide that the commission be composed of 50 members to be appointed by the city council as follows. Each council member recommends 1 commission appointee subject to approval of the city council. Appointments to fill vacancies on the commission shall be made within 30 days by the same appointing authority who appointed the prior holder of the position and shall be subject to approval of the city council. Appointments to fill vacancies occurring prior to the end of the set term shall be for the unexpired term of the member whom the appointee succeeds. The commission shall represent the diversity of the city of Los Angeles, including experience in any of the following areas, including law, education, civil rights, discrimination issues, equity, employment, housing and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer rights, and any other minority or marginalized communities. B is to remove the requirement that commission members be registered voters in Los Angeles. Recommendation number 2 is to request the city attorney, with the assistance of the CLA, to prepare and present Section 2 of the current draft ordinance entitled Civil and Human Rights Law as an entirely separate ordinance to include the following amendments. A would be to authorize the executive director or designee to include both hearing officers and administrative law judges as options for administrative hearings. B, add military or veteran status as a protected class under the ordinance. C, include a new provision allowing for compensatory penalties to be paid to complainants as an additional remedy. D, authorize the executive director to determine compensatory penalties as part of the notice of violation. E, remove any reference of payments of the administrative penalty to the complainant. F, establish cumulative penalties up to $125,000 per standard violation of the Civil and Human Rights Ordinance, and cumulative penalties of up to $250,000 per violation as a result of violent or harassing acts. Recommendation number 3 is to request the commission, once established, to prepare procedures, rules, and regulations and consider input from the immigrant advocate and develop an educational and community outreach component and report to council for approval. Recommendation number 4, instruct the CAO to report on the initial implementation costs and necessary authorities for the Civil and Human Rights Commission, including the estimated full-year cost for the commission. Recommendation number 5 is to instruct the CLA to prepare a resolution to support legislation or administrative action to minimize any restriction on the city's authority to protect individuals against discrimination. 5B is to continue to monitor any state action related to lifting the existing preemption of Fair Employment and Housing Act. Recommendation number 6, instruct the CLA to review the latest draft from the immigrant advocate, including comments from today's hearing, and report to council at the time this item is heard. And recommendation number 7, note and file the existing CLA report dated August 1st, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'm prepared to move this as a communication from the chair to the council. So be the order. Mr. President, I recognize that there's no other matters prepared to adjourn this meeting. Okay.
But, you know, and I'm sure you already did it, and if you did not do it, if you did, I'll do it again. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out, let you know that we heard everything that you have said. We really are honored and appreciate the support. And trust me, we understand their concerns where it relates to the amount of funding. We get all of that, but sometimes it's more important for us to open that door. Once we open that door one time, it makes it easier to open it up the next time. So trust me, there's a method to our madness, but we need you. We need you to send letters of support and things of that nature. It would make it easier for Mr. Cedillo, myself, other members of this committee to articulate your support to the other members of this council. So anyway, God bless you all. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank each and every one of you.